The city is having to deal with a stormwater utility as a potential source of funding for the city because of two main requirements. In July of 2014, we're going to be required to comply with new state stormwater regulations. So that's going to force additional requirements down on the city. And then additionally, there's going to be EPA required nutrient reduction goals for the City of Manassas as a jurisdiction that will require additional projects, additional implementation strategies that will cost the city additional dollars that we currently don't have. So while it is an unfunded mandate, the city is trying to wrestle with and come up with a feasible option to be able to fund those requirements on the city. The city has started with this stormwater management feasibility study with our consultant Michael Baker back in the August 2011 timeframe. We've done a feasibility study. We've took that forward through the committee process in the city, and we've arrived at recommendations to the City Council to consider to actually go into the implementation phase of the study. That was considered by the City Council in September and October of this year, and the Council actually approved to go to the final implementation phase on October 2014. The cost associated with the stormwater functions in the city have been evaluated by our consultant Michael Baker, and the cost on average and our CIP cost alone is $833,000 on an annualized basis. The CIP is just one component. There's also operation and maintenance costs associated with this, and that's in the area of just over $1 million. The projects that we have funded in the current capital improvement program range from various flooding issues to actual projects such as the Hospital Regional Stormwater Management Pond, Project D13, that result in a cost of over $6 million for the city. So those projects, all those projects that are funded from FY15 into the future are actually funded through our stormwater utility at this point. The existing requirements on stormwater regulatory requirements are changing, very fluid at this point. The actual requirements for nutrient reduction are in any jurisdiction that drain to the Chesapeake Bay. Those are federal EPA requirements. There's also new construction general permits required by the state of Virginia. And as I said earlier, the stormwater regulations effective July of 2014 are going to require additional monitoring and inspection by city staff and actually require additional permits by the development community. There is in the Virginia Code enabling legislation that allows for the formation of a stormwater utility. It's in section 15.2-2114 of the state code. Those requirements allow for the acquisition of property, planning, design, and engineering of construction of projects, and also allow for permit requirements for public education, watershed planning, and other functions. There are several jurisdictions in the Commonwealth that have actually implemented stormwater utility. The most closely related to the city and adjacency is Prince William County. The requirements on development and existing development in the city will be managed by the stormwater, and the requirements are fairly complex at this point, but new development has to actually go through the state state requirements and meet the state stormwater regulation requirements. Those will actually be enforced by the city once we adopt the new ordinance in early 2014. The existing development in the city is something the city has to manage through our MS4 permit that is issued once every 5 years in the city. Those are actually EPA requirements that are passed down through the State Department of Environmental Quality. On a programmatic standpoint, the city's stormwater utility approach has been to conduct first a feasibility study, look at the possible revenue sources, the impacts, in a general sense, on what we might be able to get from our current parcel bases in the city. That feasibility study, as it's been concluded, has identified possible funding sources, also looked at those impacts, and also recommended some additional considerations for our utility implementation plan that we've just started on. That utility implementation plan will involve a significant public outreach component. It will also determine our rate structure and to deal with the policy requirements in the stormwater utility. And as we deal with those issues over the next 10 to 12 months, we plan to have recommendations to council in the fall of 2014 with the implementation targeted for January of 2015. Be a lot of discussion with our businesses and homeowners associations so that they are aware of the requirements and also the potential funding impacts for them and the citizens. Operation and maintenance is something that a stormwater utility will fund. We have looked very closely at our current operation and maintenance and what we need to do for our current infrastructure, that being storm sewer systems, stormwater management ponds, our inspection services, and various other educational efforts. Capital components of what we need to do are varying, but a lot of those have to do with drainage improvements, as I've stated, but also new projects such as stream restoration and public education and pond dredging to allow our ponds to continue to function as designed. The stormwater infrastructure, a lot of people don't understand what stormwater structures are and where they are, because a lot of them, the drainage structures in the pipe, linear pipe systems in the city, we have over 470,000 linear feet of these storm sewer pipes in the ground. They're out of sight, out of mind until we have a bad flooding event. The city does maintain all the storm sewer in the city, and we also maintain 254 lane miles of city streets. And one of the biggest things we do to improve our stormwater quality associated with that is we have an active street sweeping program. And so that's all part of an overall program approach by the city to maintain our infrastructure. The city has looked at various levels of need for our stormwater utility and generally what our stormwater requirements are in the city, established a baseline of what our existing program is accomplishing. Right now we're about at $1.5 million of funding, and that's targeted to grow up to about just under $2 million in the next 10 years. We've looked at the additional requirements that are required from the nutrient reductions in the bay and several of those projects, along with some additional maintenance needs that we're projecting in the system, additional staffing, and that's determined a basic need that we're projecting. That's about 2.5 initially in 2014. And then that will grow to a number that's upwards of 4.5 to 5 million over the next 10 years. So that really is creating the need to try to address this from a funding standpoint. Certainly is an unfunded mandate, but we have to look at this realistically to be able to accomplish the task that we're going to be able to be subject to. What is a stormwater utility? It's a fee for services based on several things, but the extent to which a property contributes to stormwater runoff is the primary metric to which determines the cost and the amount of funding that's required from either a property owner or a homeowner in the city. Typically in a jurisdiction, this is a separate enterprise fund so that we can assure that all the funds collected are actually going towards the stormwater initiatives that we have outlined. The process that we've used for the stormwater utility and the feasibility study, we looked at our average residential and townhouse community and actual parcel in the city, privately owned parcels, came up with an average impervious area per parcel of just over 2,500 square feet. So that would be used to determine what's called an equivalent residential unit for our stormwater utility program. That ERU, as it's referenced in the industry, is something that would be used as the basis for our fee charged to citizens. It's a little different in the commercial or multifamily. We have to look at that on a parcel by parcel basis and not have just a flat fee structure as we would for residential. And so the average commercial parcel and multifamily parcel in the city was just over 25,000 square feet. And that includes all the building footprint, the private parking areas, the sidewalk and driveway. You use that and determine the actual impervious area, or those areas which cannot drain or absorb rainwater into the ground. So as I said, the residential, the general structure that we've created so far, the thought process for the stormwater utility in the city would be that residential townhomes, single-family detached, would have a flat fee tier structure, and that's similar to what Prince William County does. And then the non-residential multifamily would actually be charged on the actual impervious area that their parcel has, and we would actually have to determine what that is on a measurement basis, primarily using our GIS system, which is Geographical Information System, or a mapping system that has that clearly and defined in our system that we can actually calculate that. Undeveloped parcels will typically have no fee. In the study we did, the base parcel count in the city indicated that residential properties are actually 87% of the number of parcels we have in the city. However, the residential makeup from a stormwater contribution standpoint if you calculate impervious area as the indicator, are only 36% of the land area in the City of Manassas. 48% of that of the impervious area in the city is actually contributed to on our commercial basis in the city. So while you only have 9% of the parcels being commercial, they actually contribute almost 50% of the stormwater runoff in the city. So that is an interesting situation, because you typically will have more of a commercial property fully developed and impervious. So that makes a big difference when it comes to calculating the fees paid and who actually contributes into the fund. The city calculated the revenues potential for the stormwater utility fee in the city, and based on the impervious area calculated for the various parcels and using a standard flat fee for our residential. And it varies by the amount charged on an equivalent residential unit basis. The fee ranged from $25 per ERU to $110 per ERU. That actual fee has not been determined yet, but the range would allow for a collection of revenue just over $500,000 to where we could collect up to $2.5 million to offset the additional revenue requirements on the city. The city did create some examples and analyze some of the impacts on specific commercial properties in the city, depending upon the amount of fee established by the city for our stormwater utility fee. For ERUs ranging from $35 to $70, we were able to calculate for several properties ranging from a BB&T bank with a small footprint of only just over 5,000 square feet to one of our large industrial customers that has over 2 million square feet with impervious area of 32%. And the range of the annual fee for those entities was anywhere from $75 to upwards of $60,000. So on an annual basis, we realized that could be a significant impact to our commercial or industrial base. So we want to carefully look at the fee and make sure the impact is something that's tolerable and that can work within their frame structure. But we also need to look at it from a vantage point of it being able to fulfill the revenue needs of the stormwater utility. So we are going to be looking at that and forward-looking in the implementation study, and we did it as part of the feasibility study also. Several of the jurisdictions in the Commonwealth of Virginia have already established and created a stormwater utility. Prince William County actually created theirs back in the early 90s. Several of the Tidewater area have equivalent residential units relating to a stormwater utility that they charge. The ERUs range from a low of in the low 30s, $30 per year per ERU, to where some jurisdictions, specifically in the Tidewater area, have a fee of over $100 per year. That's it's very unique to each jurisdiction on what their revenue requirements are and what their actual program funds. So that's something that we have to look at individually as the City of Manassas to determine what fee is correct and appropriate for us to adopt. The benefits of a stormwater utility, the fees are equitable, and they're determined based on the amount of rainfall that's contributed based on impervious area of a property. There is a link between the benefit and the cost charged to a property, and the billing could be easily rolled out to a customer or citizen in the form of a utility bill or a property tax bill. It really reduces the reliance on general fund. There's a lot of stress on general fund for education funding, police, fire, rescue, and other entities, and this would allow for a dedicated source for stormwater utility. Concerns, on the other hand, there may be competing funds for the sources to meet the funding requirements. All properties pay since it's considered a fee. This is unlike a tax, whereas nonprofits don't get charged. So one of the concerns with that is churches and other nonprofits do get billed, and the use of the funds is limited to stormwater-related activities. So those are some of the concerns that are expressed. And anytime you establish a new fee, there are concerns expressed on the affordability of both citizens and businesses, and that's something that you have to really take in consideration in the adoption process. The summary of our feasibility study is we did indicate that there are additional requirements, programmatic requirements of stormwater infrastructure and needs. The city's drainage CIP is 100% funded by a stormwater utility from FY15 on, and that's an important aspect to understand, that we have to have a dedicated source of funding. It's either going to come from a stormwater utility or an increased tax fee Different jurisdictions have done that differently. Right now, Manassas feels a stormwater utility is the correct path to pursue for that revenue source. The new regulations are not if they will come. They are coming July of 2014, and the increased oversight and accountability for Manassas is going to be there at the state level through the Department of Environmental Quality. We really feel the stormwater utility is a fair and equitable funding source because it's tied directly to the amount of impervious area that a development has. Next steps in the implementation process will be to determine policies related to credit and appeals process for customers, because when they roll this system out, we know that it won't be perfect and we'll have to address those processes. Financial plan and how we will bill this to customers, whether through the utility bill or the tax billing system, will have to be finalized. Ordinance that will adopt the stormwater regulations is something the staff is currently working on, and an ordinance to actually adopt the utility rate structure will have to be created and approved by the City Council of Manassas. Public outreach will be a critical component. We'll have to not surprise our homeowners associations and Chamber of Commerce and businesses with this. So we plan to really have a public outreach that will try to reach out to those entities to inform them of what's coming. And then the implementation, exactly how we'll roll this out, will be important. Recommendations that were approved by the council in the October timeframe were to go forward with the final phase of the stormwater utility, which is funded at just below $170,000. It's being funded through stormwater escrows, and at this point the City Council has approved those dollars, and it will be the city moving forward with our consultant Michael Baker to help the city staff determine the answers to several of the outstanding questions and to help lead some of the public outreach process. As stated before, this implementation is scheduled for January of 2015 as an implementation timeline.